She is not in that water. I can tell you that for sure. She was never put in the water.
I believe this whole setup was manufactured, using the sea and the boat as a cover for whatever he actually did.
Now, I am not accusing him of doing anything at this point in time. But based on everything I observed from that reenactment, I simply do not believe she ever entered that water. 600 feet is the exact distance between where the Soulmate anchored the night Lynette Hooker vanished and the nearest beach on Elbow Cay. 600 feet, just 2 city blocks of water, separating a woman who ran marathons,
Scuba dived.
and had been living right on the ocean for weeks from dry land.
Brian Hooker claims she fell into that water and the current swept her away. He says the wind separated them so quickly that she likely tried swimming back to their sailboat, which was somewhere around, I do not know, 1,000 yards out. The Sea of Abaco has been thoroughly searched by dive teams, the Coast Guard, from the air and on foot. Lynette is simply not there. Now, the Soulmate sits docked in Fort Pierce, Florida, wrapped in crime scene tape, as federal agents search every single inch. And the single number that changes everything, the number rewriting every single question ever asked about this cold case, is the one kept hidden: 600 feet. Before we proceed, remember that Brian Hooker has not been charged with any crime as of today. The details in this documentary come directly from public reporting, official police statements, court records, and independent investigations. Everyone discussed here is presumed innocent, unless and until proven guilty inside a court of law. If you have followed this mystery, you likely know Lynette Hooker through her extensive online footprint. Her handle was The Sailing Hookers. She and her husband Brian had carved out a quiet retirement on the water, leaving Michigan to live aboard the Soulmate, their 46-foot sailboat, before setting sail for the Bahamas. Lynette was 55 years old when she vanished, while Brian was 58. Her online feeds painted a picture of someone entirely at home on the ocean, with video showing her in constant motion, wind in her hair, sunlight dancing on the waves, posing with a snorkel mask, a paddleboard, and her solar deck oven. She traveled through the Bahamas like someone exploring a chosen paradise, not a destination she simply drifted into. It was a modern love story captured in short clips and simple hashtags. A devoted couple building a new life together after their long careers had wrapped up. Their posts highlighted not just beautiful scenery, but real skill, showing Lynette and Brian navigating tight channels, refilling heavy scuba tanks, and keeping the vessels steady through sudden storms while traveling by dinghy between islands, frequently without wearing life jackets, proving just how routine and safe they felt during those quick island trips. These were not amateurs who feared the open sea. These were 2 experienced sailors for whom the ocean was home. Her very last Instagram post featured boats resting in calm, crystal-clear water. The caption simply read, "Not going anywhere for a while." Just days after posting that, she vanished without a trace. Her mother, Darlene Hamlet, spoke with ABC News shortly after she went missing. Her words about her daughter have anchored this entire investigation from the very start. Hamlet shared that Lynette grew up living right on a lake, that she was an expert swimmer, scuba diver, and boater who regularly ran marathons and practiced yoga. "My daughter grew up right on the water, around boats her entire life." She described her own daughter as a wonderful woman, physically strong and highly capable, driven by a quiet determination, someone completely at home in the water. Lynette's daughter, Carly Aylesworth, remembers her mother as a strong, regular swimmer, active, fit, and deeply comfortable in the ocean. "My mom is incredibly strong and fit. She is an excellent swimmer." But why would she swim away from the vessel? Why did she have the key? The whole story simply does not make any sense to me.
That portrait of pure grit,
Of a person who never quits, makes that 600-foot distance in the public record feel so incredibly significant.
A strong swimmer, 600 feet of calm, sheltered water, and a beach just across.
Yet she never reached that shoreline.
Then there is another critical clue uncovered by CBS News in May 2026.
A text message Lynette sent before her Bahamas trip, sent to someone whose identity remains closely guarded. The text was chilling, reading, "It was real bad. I cannot be out there with him." That message remains entirely unexplained, and Brian Hooker's defense team has kept completely silent about it.
It lingers in the official files, much like so many other details in
This mystery, unresolved, just waiting for the police investigation to finally uncover the truth.
And it stands alongside pictures of a smiling woman who always called the ocean her happy place,
raising a haunting question that no observer of this tragedy has been able to solve.
What was happening aboard the Soulmate that made her feel so desperate to escape?
Let us look closely at Brian Hooker's timeline, exactly as he told it. You cannot spot the holes in his story until you know the actual timeline first.
On the evening of April 4th, 2026, Brian and Lynette Hooker left the Abaco Inn in Hopetown on Elbow Cay.
They climbed into an 8-foot hard-bottom dinghy powered by a Torpedo electric outboard motor.
They set off at roughly 7:30 p.m.
The sun had gone down just 4 minutes prior.
The water ahead was already pitch black as they steered toward the Soulmate.
The boat was anchored about a mile south of Hopetown, near Aunt Pat's Bay. Along the western shore of Elbow Cay, in calm conditions, traveling slowly with their small electric outboard motor.
This was a short trip measured in minutes, not hours.
According to the local Royal Bahamas Police,
Brian claimed to investigators that somewhere along the way, Lynette fell over the side of the dinghy.
She was wearing the safety lanyard,
that crucial engine kill switch designed to stop the motor if anyone falls overboard. When Lynette tumbled into the water, the cord pulled free, instantly killing the motor.
During a recorded call on April 7th, which Brian made to his friends Blaine and Marnie Stevenson,
a recording they later shared publicly on their YouTube channel.
Brian explained the tragedy in his own words.
He claimed that Lynette had basically just bounced right off the dinghy.
He admitted neither of them wore life vests, calling the sequence of events a cascade of failures.
With winds blowing at roughly 20 miles per hour, he claimed he tossed her a floating seat cushion.
I threw her a flotation cushion, the kind we sat on in the dinghy.
Right after she went under, but I could not see if she ever grabbed it.
he claimed he tried desperately to reach her, but simply could not.
He claimed the heavy currents swept her away, and she quickly vanished from sight.
Richard Cook, the fire team lead with Hopetown Volunteer Fire and Rescue, revealed a detail to CNN that Brian completely omitted from his public statement. Brian told Cook that he last saw Lynette actively swimming,
specifically heading toward the shore of Elbow Cay, making for the beach just 600 feet from where the Soulmate was anchored. She was swimming directly toward safety, but she never made it.
Yet that was not the only story Brian told about her direction that night.
In a private Facebook Messenger chat with a friend named Daniel Danforth, Brian claims something else entirely.
He wrote,
"The wind pushed me away from her. She swam toward the sailboat, and we lost track of each other fast because it was right at dusk." Two versions, two directions. In one story, she was swimming toward safety, toward Elbow Cay, heading for land. In the other, she was swimming back to the Soulmate, toward the vessel in a totally opposite direction. These two accounts do not align, and both conflicting versions came directly from Brian Hooker himself. She was never found in either of those directions.
Now look at the timeline, because timing is everything. Brian and Lynette departed Hopetown at 7:30 p.m. on April 4th.
The next verified event in Brian's story is 4 a.m. on April 5th, when his dinghy drifted ashore near the Marsh Harbor boatyard,
roughly 4.5 nautical miles west of where the Soulmate was anchored.
Brian claims he paddled that entire distance using just one oar. He made his way through the brush to the boatyard. He told a worker there that his wife went overboard, prompting them to alert the authorities immediately. Hopetown Volunteer Fire and Rescue was notified at 5:12 a.m.
That was 9.5 hours after Lynette reportedly vanished in the water. 9.5 hours before search and rescue got involved.
During those critical 9.5 hours, there was no radio call, no distress signal, no mayday, no emergency beacon. Just Brian paddling alone in the pitch black. This detail is critical because the maritime community has strict, established protocols for this exact emergency. A person overboard at night, swept by strong currents, is a life or death emergency. The instant response, the trained reaction. The instinctive reaction. The standard marine response is a mayday call on Channel 16, the international emergency frequency, monitored constantly by the Coast Guard and nearby boats. You broadcast your exact coordinates and describe your critical emergency. You scream for help. Brian Hooker claimed his sailboat lost engine power the moment Lynette went over. But a handheld marine radio does not need ship power. It runs on its own batteries. Whether the Soulmate carried a handheld radio, like almost every cruising sailboat does, and whether Brian actually had it with him in the dinghy, is a question investigators can answer by reviewing the official boat inventory and by checking the digital records currently being analyzed at Fort Pierce. The yacht was also outfitted with Starlink satellite internet, as proven by their social media posts. The Hookers were always connected at sea. The mystery of what messages were sent or ignored during those vital hours. Between 7:30 p.m. on April 4th and 4 a.m. on April 5th is something the electronic data in Fort Pierce should soon answer.
9.5 hours.
No mayday call, no distress signals, and no contact with other vessels in an anchorage where at least one other boat sat close by. Richard Cook noted that Hopetown Volunteer Rescue searched for 6 hours after being notified, finding absolutely nothing. Search and rescue teams then escorted Brian back to his vessel, the Soulmate. Later, his close friend Blaine Stevenson opened up to Fox News Digital, stating, "After searching for just 3 or 4 hours initially, Brian went back to the Soulmate, remaining there for nearly 24 hours. 24 hours on board, failing to search the Elbow Cay shoreline or dive the very anchorage where Lynette was last seen." Stevenson and Brian shared a history spanning back years. He and his wife Marnay first met the Hookers through the tight-knit sailing community. Naturally, he was among the few Brian contacted on April 7th. He eventually released a recording of that call. And regarding Brian's puzzling actions in the days after April 4th, Stevenson made no effort to mask his frustration. He told Fox News Digital that Brian never truly faced the situation, refusing to offer anyone any more details than he gave at the very start, when he was supposedly in shock. Speaking to News Nation, he insisted Brian needed to step up, recalling that Brian was a former Marine, a union leader, a fighter, the kind of man who should be out there doing everything possible. Then he asked the ultimate question. Even if he accepts that his wife is gone, does he not want closure? Does he not crave redemption? That question still echoes without an answer. By April 6th, he had relocated to the Conch Inn in Marsh Harbor. On April 8th, Bahamian police detained him. Official sources from the Royal Bahamas Police Force cited, quote, "probable cause" to Reuters. They held him, interrogated him, extended his detention, and questioned him again. On April 13th, 9 full days after Lynette vanished, they released him without charge. Terrell Butler, his Bahamian attorney, announced to the press that Brian was free to go. Brian himself claimed he would never stop searching for Lynette. "I won't be able to stop. You want to keep looking for Lynette? I am going to need someone with more authority to tell me to stop," insisting that he was staying in the Bahamas. But just hours later, he boarded a commercial flight and fled.
His lawyer told NBC News that his mother was gravely ill. He never returned. On his public Facebook page, Brian had uploaded a statement addressing the disappearance. It read, "I am devastated by the recent boating accident in rough seas and high winds that caused my beloved Lynette to fall from our small dinghy near Elbow Cay in the Bahamas.
Despite desperate attempts to save her, severe winds and currents pushed us further apart.
We are continuing our search for her, and that is my absolute focus."
Unpredictable seas, high winds, desperate attempts.
Now, let's test those claims against the actual geography. On April 18, 2026, 2 weeks after she vanished, an independent sailing analyst named Sam Lyles posted a deep geographic breakdown on his blog, SV Odie.
Lyles actually drafted his first notes on the case.
From Nassau on April 9th, while pinned down by weather during a southbound passage.
He was another mariner in that same island chain, tracking the mystery directly from the water. His findings are by no means official, but they carry the weight of a seasoned sailor who knows these waters intimately, not from a newsroom, but from direct experience.
What Lyles contributed to the public record was raw geography.
Concrete, measurable, chart-confirmed geography.
The Soulmate lay anchored in the lee of Elbow Cay, right inside Aunt Pat's Bay.
Just north of Tahiti Beach, where the Sea of Abaco begins to narrow.
Lyles scrutinized the digital tracking data of the Soulmate's location that afternoon, measuring the exact distance from its anchorage to Elbow Cay's closest beach. That distance was only about 600 feet. And right along the deep draft line, where sailors anchor to avoid running aground. The gap between that vessel and the Elbow Cay shore shrinks to barely 300 feet in some spots.
300 feet. The exact length of a football field, or the width of one city block.
That is how close the Soulmate was sitting to dry land at its nearest point.
Lyles wrote that if she went overboard near the Soulmate, she was close enough to wade ashore in less time than it takes to read this sentence.
Yet that striking reality is completely absent from every mainstream report on the Lynette Hooker case.
Throughout weeks of intense national media coverage,
Spread across hundreds of articles, television segments, and true crime podcast episodes.
Not a single major news outlet mentioned that the Soulmate was anchored only 600 feet from Elbow Cay. No one pointed out that the deeper anchorage places the boat a mere 300 feet from the shoreline.
Every major report has painted Lynette as a victim swept away into a vast, unforgiving ocean. The narrative was always framed around distance,
Claiming the ocean was too wide, the currents too fierce, and the night too dark.
They never mentioned those 2 blocks of calm, protected water separating the vessel from the sand. But now you know.
And that single fact shifts every question you have ever asked about this mystery.
What makes this specific digital data so incredibly vital in an investigation centered on?
What happened in the pitch-black ocean with only one surviving witness is that it is completely outside his control.
This evidence does not need another witness.
It bypasses memory, cooperation, and honesty entirely. That watch was strapped tightly to Lynette's wrist.
Whatever happened to her happened to that watch simultaneously. Internal sensors were actively tracking her biometrics as those dark events unfolded.
Its GPS was mapping her precise location.
Accelerometers tracked her physical movements, while the Bluetooth log registered any device stepping within range. Every physical interaction is locked in that device's memory, time-stamped independently of any human story told about that night. And it will stand as objective truth, no matter what is later claimed, confessed, or denied about the events of April 4th, 2026.
We know Lynette and Brian Hooker visited the Abaco Inn that afternoon.
A key photo places her there, and several witnesses confirmed seeing them.
The watch was silently logging
her coordinates independently, locking in timestamps that match the exact hours of that photograph.
Two entirely separate records of one single moment.
One frozen forever in a photo, the other ticking long after the camera shutter closed.
Journalist Banfield obtained and broadcasted on Drop Dead Serious.
A second photo from that day, showing Brian heading toward the dock from the Abaco Inn, entirely alone, without Lynette.
The exact timing of that picture raised glaring questions she analyzed on air.
Whatever mysteries lie in the gaps between those photos regarding who was where and when,
The Apple Watch's tracking data fills those blanks minute by minute, completely untouched by human claims.
Brian Hooker's public statements place the critical timeline much later that night. He claims that both of them boarded their small, 8-foot hard-bottom dinghy and set out,
Heading out toward the Soulmate, which sat anchored in Aunt Pat's Bay, near Elbow Cay.
During that rough ride, navigating choppy waters with winds he estimated at around 20 miles per hour, Lynette fell overboard.
she wore the small dinghy's engine safety lanyard, a cord designed to instantly cut power if anyone goes overboard.
When she fell, the motor died. He claims he tried paddling while watching Lynette swim toward the distant shore,
Before eventually losing sight of her,
finally drifting into the Marsh Harbor boatyard in the dark, early hours of April 5th.
Authorities confirmed he arrived there at approximately 4 a.m.
Everything captured by the Apple Watch between that Abaco photograph and whatever stopped its recording on the night of April 4th remains in memory. Every GPS coordinate,
Each heart rate reading, every single accelerometer event, every Bluetooth connection, and every fall.
detectives now hold the watch. Brian Hooker has not been charged with any crime. His defense attorney stated he completely and absolutely denies any wrongdoing. The Royal Bahamas police force detained him for 5 days under a court-approved extension, releasing him without charge once the Department of Public Prosecutions recommended no immediate legal action. His lawyer later pointed to a terminally ill mother to explain why he returned to the United States. For that public story to align with the actual digital evidence, the smartwatch data must tell a very specific tale. The GPS tracking would have to place the watch along a path, matching a small boat ride toward the Soulmate, before stopping short of the boat, proving someone indeed fell overboard before arriving. The recorded heart rate must show the clear physiological signs of a person struggling in open water. The motion sensors would need to capture a sudden fall event that matches the impact he described. The Bluetooth logs must show zero interaction with any equipment aboard the Soulmate. No Starlink, no connection to onboard electronics, and absolutely no proximity data near that yacht. Verified media reports add critical layers to what the smartwatch records must prove. Brian Hooker left a voicemail for Lynette's daughter, obtained and shared by CNN, claiming he tossed a life preserver to Lynette, which rescue teams in Hopetown supposedly recovered later.
Hello, honey. I just heard from Hopetown's search and rescue. They found the flotation ring I threw to Mom when she fell over, but they haven't found her yet. Though they can now concentrate their search in a much tighter area, and they are still looking for her today. His timeline requires him to throw that life ring while she was struggling in the water. If the Apple Watch was strapped to her wrist when she plunged in, it would register that moment. The sensors mapping the sudden splash, and the motion history transitioning instantly from a rocking boat to a desperate fight for survival. Her heart rate spiking from the shock of cold water. Biometric logs from someone falling into deep ocean water at night must carry a unique physical signature, completely distinct from any normal activity. If that precise signature is missing from the watch on the night of April 4th, detectives are left wondering where that device actually was during those critical hours. Yet the watch somehow still ended up back on the Soulmate. And that is the exact question Banfield put directly to her audience. If Lynette had that watch on before she went missing, how did it end up back on the yacht? Banfield revealed on Drop Dead Serious. that Brian Hooker's professional history included AT&T and working with GPS and communication networks,
raising serious questions about his technical understanding of how these systems function and how someone might bypass them.
Brian Hooker has the technical skills to know how
to manipulate the GPS tracker on his van, ensuring his managers would never know his exact location at any given moment.
That is her specific angle.
Other news outlets haven't confirmed this yet, so we present it with caution.
Brian Hooker told police the dinghy's safety lanyard cut the engine when Lynette went overboard.
Multiple news outlets confirm this, citing official Royal Bahamas Police Force reports.
Whether the yacht's electronics and the watches.
Data actually back up that timeline is something Fort Pierce investigators can now prove by analyzing both. There is no easy explanation for how a watch worn on her wrist ended up back on a boat she never returned to. The digital trail either proves it or it doesn't. That same logic applies to every single piece of digital evidence. It will either validate the story they were told or expose a massive hole in it. Banfield revealed a key detail from Lynette's inner circle that completely changes how detectives look at the watch's final logs. Every single evening around dinner time, Lynette took off her watch and set it to charge. She mentioned she couldn't wear it to bed because the battery would die, so charging it overnight was a must. Around what time of night? Would she plug it in because the battery was already drained? Most likely right after dinner. Her specific model required daily charging, making this a strict routine rather than a habit. That predictable habit makes the last charge cycle a critical piece of forensic evidence.
The final GPS location logged before the device connected to power
marks the very last spot Lynette could have been before she took it off. So, if your mother actually made it back to the yacht instead of falling from the dinghy,
as Brian claims,
she might have unbuckled her Apple Watch and placed it directly onto the charger. Yes. If she kept that routine on April 4th, the GPS coordinates show exactly where she took it off. If those coordinates show she was on the Soulmate, it directly contradicts the story that was told publicly. A precise location pin, proving the watch was on that exact boat at that precise hour of the night. No ambiguity, no guesswork required. But if the coordinates put the watch anywhere else but the Soulmate, at the dock, the inn, or away from the yacht, it triggers a much more unsettling question. How did that device eventually find its way back to the boat where police found it? Then there is a third scenario. The watch never hit the charger.
It sank into the ocean with Lynette.
The power dying upon hitting the water, only to be placed on the Soulmate later by another person. In that scenario, that final batch of data is critical because it holds the exact GPS coordinates of the precise moment that smartwatch hit the water, the accelerometer reading from that impact, and the heart rate data showing exactly what Lynette's body was enduring during those final seconds. The watch remained on her wrist. Every charging log leaves a location and a clear timestamp. Hitting the water records a location and time. A signal that suddenly dies also leaves a location and time. None of those endings ever go silent. Whatever the device tracked as its last gasp, that log is still there. The Coast Guard Investigative Service launched a formal criminal probe into Lynette Hooker's disappearance on April 8, 2026. That very day, Bahamian police took Brian Hooker into custody to begin interrogating him. Two parallel investigations running at once, one Bahamian, one United States federal. The CGIS acts as the dedicated investigative branch of the United States Coast Guard, functioning as a federal agency with absolute jurisdiction over ocean-based crimes and the power to cross international boundaries whenever American citizens vanish or are harmed on the open ocean. They can issue federal subpoenas, secure warrants, and force major tech companies like Apple to hand over user account data. Their agents can track ships across open seas and board vessels drifting in international waters. Every single resource in that massive federal arsenal
is active right now.
For anything regarding April 4, 2026, the CGSIS in Miami is the team to contact.
No matter how small the detail you saw or heard, investigators want to hear it.
There is one angle of this mystery that remains,
Largely ignored from the start, the complex clash of jurisdictions.
because knowing who actually controls this investigation reveals exactly where this entire case is heading.
Lynette Hooker went missing in the Bahamas.
The Bahamas is a fully sovereign nation, boasting its own police force, court system, and laws. The Royal Bahamian Police conducted the opening investigation. Bahamian police locked Brian up. Their local courts extended his detention. Yet, Bahamian officials ultimately freed him without filing charges.
Usually, that is where international tragedies like this one hit a wall.
The local government keeps control of the file, and whatever they decide is the absolute end of the road. But this mystery has a completely different blueprint.
The United States Coast Guard launched its own federal probe early on April 8, 2026, matching the day Bahamian police locked Brian up.
When the CGIS initiates a criminal case,
They are backed by the full power of American federal authority. Crucially, both Brian and Lynette are United States citizens.
And their boat, the Soulmate, is documented under American maritime law.
The absolute moment that boat crossed out of Bahamian territory and the CGIS intercepted it 40 miles off Melbourne. Every single piece of evidence on board became subject to strict American federal laws. That is precisely why impounding the Soulmate in American territory was a massive breakthrough, far exceeding what local Bahamian police could ever achieve alone. Local warrants in the Bahamas seized the yacht's security recorders and phones. But those local efforts produced zero criminal charges. Now, with the physical vessel secured in America, federal prosecutors can build a powerful criminal case. The Coast Guard's maritime law enforcement power is built for crimes that drift across the narrow waters separating the Bahamas and Florida. How investigators analyze cases like this. A Bahamian lawyer, Terrell Butler, represented Brian during that initial local phase. Back home, Brian hired a Michigan lawyer to handle the domestic defense. 2 legal teams in 2 countries. Meanwhile, a parallel investigation has been active since April 8th. Whatever this federal inquiry uncovers, and how they choose to act on it, is completely independent of whatever the Bahamian police decided to do. The CGIS can use federal grand jury powers if the proof demands it. No one has publicly confirmed if a grand jury has actually been called for this case. But we do know the boat is sitting at Fort Pierce. Federal agents wearing protective gear and sealed evidence bags being carried away. This is the real physical proof of an active federal probe. Still, Brian Hooker faces no charges. The case remains wide open, and the detectives running it are not passive spectators. They are the ones who will ultimately decide if the mystery of April 4th is ever resolved in front of a federal judge. Lynette Hooker's daughter, Carly Ainsworth, shared a heartbreaking video on Mother's Day, 2026. It is the first Mother's Day without my mom. It is really hard right now, just knowing she is not a text away anymore. My birthday was last Sunday too, so it has been an incredibly heavy week, honestly.
CBS News drone footage from May 11th.
2026 showed the vessel there.
Fox News confirmed crime scene tape wrapped the vessel on May 12th, with agents in black shirts and blue gloves actively carrying out evidence bags.
The massive force behind this seizure, with surveillance teams, sea vessels, and air support, an official cutter, tow, and a forensics team on site within 24 hours, shows how much agencies invest when they believe a boat holds evidence needed to close a case. Every single electronic device on board is now being analyzed by federal experts. The Starlink system, which reporter Banfield noted, was on the vessel during her coverage on Drop Dead Sirius. Every GPS unit,
Every Bluetooth device and the boat's own navigation systems would have tracked and logged its precise location on the night of April 4th. If the boat was anchored in Aunt Pat's Bay, while Brian claimed the accident happened elsewhere, those records will show it.
If their Starlink was turned on, it recorded connection logs.
If that
smartwatch ever returned to the boat, it likely connected to their Starlink Wi-Fi.
Brian Hooker strongly denies any wrongdoing, and his attorneys have rejected all accusations made by the family.
These are public claims, not proven court facts.
We are sharing them because they form the official record that launched this criminal probe. They match the details Carly Ainsworth gave to CGIS agents
During a 2-hour interview on the very day this federal probe officially began.
Then there is that text message obtained by CBS News. "It was real bad. I cannot be out there with him."
Lynette sent those words regarding Brian before they even left for the Bahamas.
Before April 4th, before the dinghy incident, the kill switch, and that 4 a.m. arrival at Marsh Harbor.
She knew something was terribly wrong. She put her fears in writing and then went back.
Lynette's own mother, Darlene Hamlet,
told ABC News simply, "I just want the truth to come out. I hope they can do that, and I hope they find her. Maybe then we can clear all of this up."
Just a mother waiting, desperate to know what really happened to her daughter.
And that is where this family waits.
44 days in, staring at crime scene tape on a Florida boat, waiting on a federal investigation that still has no answers. Here is exactly what happened to that vessel.
Between May 8th and May 10th, 2026, the Soulmate left Marsh Harbor in the Bahamas, charting a course toward the United States.
But the Coast Guard was already watching. About 40 nautical miles off the coast of Melbourne, Florida, investigators from the Coast Guard suddenly intercepted the vessel. Official records describe the seizure as part of a highly complex, planned surveillance and interdiction operation.
They were targeting that specific boat.
The intercept was completely deliberate. This was no routine boarding. Escorted to the Coast Guard station in Fort Pierce, Florida, the Soulmate was secured under tight federal custody.
By May 12th,
Fox News Digital published leaked photos showing yellow crime scene tape draped across parts of the vessel at Fort Pierce.
an insider close to the investigation confirmed to Fox News Digital that forensic teams were actively processing the vessel.
On May 13th, local media reported seeing federal investigators clad in black shirts with yellow lettering, tactical pads,
and blue gloves, meticulously searching the vessel and carrying away items in sealed evidence bags.
Months before this, Bahamian authorities had already executed a sweeping search warrant on the Soulmate. That initial search led to the seizure of key items,
Specifically, a digital video recorder, tablets, and mobile phones.
Those devices have been locked in federal evidence lockers since the early days.
And now the boat itself, the hull.
Cabin, deck, and bilge, every single interior compartment is being combed over by federal agents.
Think about the sheer volume of evidence the Soulmate holds.
It holds the AIS transponder record, the automatic tracking system that broadcasts and logs a vessel's exact position over time.
The Soulmate was transmitting its location throughout the entirety of April 4th.
That digital footprint is permanently recorded within global maritime tracking networks.
And investigators have it. It reveals precisely where the Soulmate anchored that night, and if the boat moved at all when Lynette went missing. It contains the chart plotter and the complete navigation history. The exact GPS track showing where the boat traveled in the weeks leading up to April 4th.
And during those critical, dark hours of April 4th and 5th.
Every sudden course change, every position fix, and every logged waypoint is sitting there waiting to be recovered. It holds whatever biological trace evidence might still linger on its surfaces.
In a forensic sweep where someone supposedly fell overboard and the person reporting it stayed on board for another 24 hours, investigators hunt for very specific clues.
Like blood spatters,
other DNA samples,
and any signs of violence or struggle that happened on board rather than in the open water. The presence or total absence of that evidence tells its own story.
It contains the onboard communication systems.
The Starlink satellite internet connection flagged on the Hooker social media,
The VHF radio logs, and every text or call record from devices used aboard that vessel. Who was Brian talking to, and what was he saying around April 4th?
The digital records hold those exact answers.
The digital video recorders seized by Bahamian police during an earlier search, whatever it captured, sits somewhere in the evidence files.
if that DVR captured footage from the cameras aboard the Soulmate.
During those critical hours around April 4th, that footage is crucial.
Then there is the AT&T connection. Ashley Banfield's Drop Dead Serious podcast dug into rumors about Brian Hooker's past. As a former AT&T insider with deep knowledge of GPS and telecom systems, including disturbing allegations of past GPS tampering,
Access to the digital records aboard the Soulmate
becomes incredibly significant when you realize the man living on that boat had expert training in the exact tracking tech investigators are using to rebuild the timeline. This is no longer a missing persons case. Yellow crime scene tape and federal agents wearing evidence gloves, carrying sealed bags off a 46-foot sailboat 40 miles out from the Florida coast. That signals a criminal probe. The Coast Guard treated it as such from day one, and now they secured the vessel. Brian Hooker hasn't been charged, maintains his absolute innocence, and the active investigation continues. The contents of those sealed evidence bags remain strictly confidential. Yet the Soulmate is speaking, and federal investigators in Fort Pierce are listening closely.
Let's focus again on that starting number, 600 feet.
Lynette Hooker was only 600 feet from land when her husband claims she fell overboard. She was an athletic marathoner, a certified diver, and a strong swimmer, by her daughter's account. Her mother described her as someone raised around lakes, highly skilled and comfortable in deep water since childhood. The shallow basin she vanished in was 6 to 25 feet deep, with clear white sand visible from above.
The water temperature was 77 degrees Fahrenheit.
In normal conditions, a body in these waters floats within 1 to 3 days, easily spotted by air.
13 days of multi-agency search operations yielded nothing. Sam Lyles constructed that theory using maritime charts, GPS data, water temps, and forensic decomposition timelines. He is no badge-wearing detective. He is simply a local sailor who understands these tides, asking the critical geographic questions ignored by major media outlets.
And those precise geographic queries yield a set of dark answers that investigators at Fort Pierce are currently piecing together.
The first chilling answer is that she never went overboard at that spot.
Given Brian's version of what transpired with Lynette on the night of April 4th,
that shallow basin near the Soulmate's anchorage is simply not where she lies. If that holds true, the entire search operation was pointed in the wrong direction from day one.
and detectives are now swarming the vessel in Fort Pierce,
struggling to pinpoint where the truth actually lies. The second scenario is that she went under and was actively kept from floating. A victim held down in a shallow, crystal-clear basin by intentional weights will never rise to the surface. It will never be spotted from search helicopters. Search divers only covered limited areas. But whether they hit the right spots, in the right order, deep enough, that remains a mystery. The third possibility lies entirely on dry land. One of the Cays, the Abaco mainland, somewhere far beyond the reach of any water search. They brought in cadaver dogs, but the exact details of where and what those dogs searched remain classified. Federal investigators down in Fort Pierce now hold the boat. They have the tracking logs, the digital forensics, the biological traces, and her entire communication history. They have Carly Aylesworth's raw testimony
from a 2-hour interview the day the CGIS opened its criminal case.
They have the official statements from her family.
They have the life jacket that washed ashore in the exact spot the dinghy did.
And they have the final text Lynette sent right before she stepped onto that boat.
Yet Brian Hooker has not been charged. What happens next hinges on the case investigators build, what the forensics team uncovers on the Soulmate, and what those sealed evidence bags actually hold.
The investigation is mapping out the physical geography,
focusing on a single number everyone missed. A number that completely rewrites every single question in this mystery.
Lynette Hooker remains missing, with more than 40 agonizing days gone by as of this recording. Her mother is demanding the truth. Her daughter, Carly, spent her very first Mother's Day completely alone. And Carly still carries the weight of threats made long before her mother disappeared.
There is a beach on Elbow Cay, just 600 feet from the Soulmate. Brian claims he last saw her swimming toward that shore.
Yet another time, he claimed she swam toward the sailboat. Two conflicting directions, two separate stories. Meanwhile, one woman was just 600 feet from safety. She should have survived. Investigators are now desperately trying to understand why she did not.
If this mystery matters to you, and if you have watched this far, it certainly does,
keep watching. We will follow every single development as it breaks, including updates from the Fort Pierce Forensic Lab, any formal charges filed by the federal government, any news regarding that mystery witness vessel, and every new piece of the official public record. Make sure to subscribe so you never miss an update on this case or our other investigations.
If this deep dive brought the picture into focus for you,
please share it with others who need to see what the geography of this case really looks like.
That 600 feet figure needs to be at the center of the conversation around Lynette Hooker. And if you have any tips regarding that mystery vessel,
the Coast Guard is actively looking for the sailboat anchored right near the Soulmate in Aunt Pat's Bay on the night of April 4th, 2026.
Please contact CGIS Miami. Lynette's family is still waiting. The case remains open, and Lynette Hooker is still out there somewhere, waiting to be found. The events detailed in this documentary are based on public news reports, official government statements, court records, and independent expert analysis. Brian Hooker has not been formally charged with any crime as of today and is presumed innocent. His legal counsel has firmly denied all allegations of wrongdoing. The map and geographic analysis shown here were published by Sam Lyles on the Sveti blog at sveti.net on April 18th. 2026, representing an independent evaluation by a sailing writer and analyst. These findings are not official law enforcement conclusions. The accusations raised by family members reflect their personal claims and have not been proven in a court of law. The United States Coast Guard Investigative Service is still actively probing the disappearance of Lynette Hooker. Critical details surrounding this mystery may have developed further since this production was finalized for release.